Welcome to the Dad Nation podcast, where men go from good to great in their life and love. Listen, now more than ever, our world needs strong, courageous, and compassionate men, because we believe that when the dad gets better, the whole family wins. Now, this movement is called Dad Nation, but ultimately this is for the wives and the children and the generations to come, because we also believe that every wife and child deserves a father who is pursuing greatness. My name is Mitchell Osman, and I am so humbled and I'm so grateful that you have chosen to spend your precious resource, which is your time, with me today. Well, listen, I am excited about our podcast episode today. It is with Sathiya Sam, okay? And Sathiya Sam is the dynamic founder of Deep Clean, which is a coaching powerhouse liberating men from the grips of pornography addiction. With a background steeped in academia and interpersonal research, Sathiya brings a unique blend of intellect and empathy to the table. As an accomplished author, an international speaker, and the mastermind behind the Man Within podcast, he deep dives into the intersection of timeless principles and cutting-edge science, guiding his audiences through in-depth transformational processes. With a decade of pastoral experience fueling his passion, Sathiya is on a mission to unleash the full potential in every individual, helping them lead lives of purpose, fulfillment, and freedom. Sathiya's impact extends far and wide, having helped thousands of men break free from pornography through Deep Clean's transformative system. He's renowned for his ability to break down complex concepts into easily digestible insights. Sathiya makes profound principles practical, offering actionable steps for real-life transformation. His unwavering commitment to inspiring freedom through hope has earned him a reputation as a beacon of empowerment and positive change in the realm of personal development, especially amongst men. Well, listen, I'm so excited about this episode, and I know a bunch of you have been waiting for me to talk about this topic. So without further ado, we're going to jump straight into this conversation with Sathiya. Hope you enjoy. Well, welcome to the Dad Nation podcast, Sathiya, and just thank you for joining us on the show today. For those listeners who haven't yet heard of Sathiya a little bit, he's going to share his story, but I just wanted to say before we get going that I just personally love his mission, his content. He just has a powerful mission, and just really excited about getting into this conversation. We're going to talk about a bunch of different stuff. And for time's sake, I don't want to waste too much time, so we're going to jump straight into the conversation. So, Sathiya, when you, why don't you just start off our conversation with just telling us a little bit about the genesis story, man, of what made you get into this this kind of demographic and this message and this mission. What's your genesis story, so to speak?
Yeah, thanks for having me for starters, Mitchell. I really appreciate it. And I'm always grateful when I get a chance to speak to audiences like yours. My professional work is I help men who are struggling with pornography addiction. And nobody sets out to be in this kind of work when they're a kid. It's not usually the dream career. And so the story here is that I had my own struggle. I struggled with pornography addiction for 15 years. I come from a home that's well educated. My dad was a pastor. Went to Christian schools. Everything was set up for me to make good decisions in life and not become a porn addict. And yet, that was my story. I got exposed to pornography in the computer lab of my Christian school. I was just 11 years old. And that wasn't it's not like I got addicted overnight, but it was the start of something that gradually developed. And by the time I was early 20s, university age, I was binging pornography on a regular basis to cope with the cares of life and to kind of make it through the days. And truly, I had no other way to process or cope or deal. And pornography was the one thing I could reliably go to that kind of gave me a little bit of relief, a little bit of a sense of reward. It was something to look forward to. And while I was in university, I was very, very studious. I had my honors degree by the time I was 20. I had 5 figures in research grants, so very involved in labs where the conversations around God are non-existent because it's presumed that you would not be dumb enough to believe in God, that kind of deal. And regardless of, where you stand faith-wise, the point is I was at a crossroads where everything I grew up with believing was now being questioned by the environment I was in. So I did a lot of soul searching. I was trying to figure out, do I actually believe this, or is this just, some nice fairy tales that my parents taught me growing up? And I ultimately landed on, I do believe it, and I want to commit my life. And I knew with that decision, again, growing up in the church, I knew if I was going to do this, I needed to live a life that was, I guess, morally aligned. In other words, day to day, I wanted to reflect what I believe to be the standards of the Bible. And part of that was quitting pornography.
Mm.
And I always told myself I could quit. I just needed a good enough reason. Now I had a good enough reason. Then I tried to quit and I could not for the life of me stop. I went 2 days the first time I tried to quit. And that was a real wake up call. That was like a revelation. Oh, I guess maybe this is a bit worse than I thought. I probably just need to turn up the willpower a little bit. So I kept trying harder. That didn't work. Then I tried internet filters and accountability partners. And I honestly, I was trying everything. It was so important to me that I had this area of my life figured out, and nothing seemed to work. So for 3 years, I spun my tires. My intentions were pure. I was putting my heart, soul, mind, strength into it. But really, at about the 3 year mark, I just realized none of these solutions work. I don't get it. Everybody says this is what you're supposed to do. They're not helping me. So either these solutions are not everything they're cracked up to be, or something is fundamentally wrong with me. And I found out, it was a relief to find out it was actually the solutions that were the problem. And so I found some better solutions. We can get into what that looked like. But in February 2016, I had my last relapse. In 2018, I launched Deep Clean, and that's the organization that I run today. We've helped thousands of men from around the world quit pornography successfully through, again, a very novel approach that a lot of people aren't talking about, but is wildly effective.
Wow. Well, hey, thank you, man, for sharing your story and your struggle with this. I mean, it's powerful, and I think when people share their experiences, just by bringing some of that things you held in the dark to light, it helps others people who are listening to get help that they need. It gives them the courage to get the help that they need. And so, I'd love to talk about some of those solutions a little bit later, but for now, let's just unpack this a little bit because a lot of my listeners are going to be millennial dads or got a couple of young kids or married and so and even I've heard of different therapists and stuff have recommended pornography to help spice up the sex life and all these different things. And so let's just talk about it a little bit. What is the problem with porn exactly? I mean, because not everybody had, like you said, has that faith background, right? And so from a
Yeah.
moral perspective, so let's talk a little bit about maybe the psychology or how it affects our relationships. Do you have any insights to share with us?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. When I started this work, that was the thing. Like everybody said, hey, that's a cool work. And I think they thought, yeah, the morally prude will be really excited to get on board. But what's happened in the last few years, Mitchell, is researchers in psychiatry, psychology, and neuroscience in particular are starting to identify that pornography is actually having a big impact on the brain and the body. And so
Mm.
we can get into the specifics of it. Like I said, I was a university researcher, so I really do enjoy talking about this stuff. But I'll give you some kind of tip of the spear items that might be valuable for your audience. We know the divorce rate is very high. 56% of divorces report their partner's porn use as the primary reason for the divorce. So pornography impacts relationships. Let me give you a different angle to that. They did a study on relationship satisfaction. There were 31 metrics. These are verified metrics that are proven. Like these all indicate some degree of relationship quality. They found that when someone was watching pornography, 30 out of the 31 variables were negatively affected by the porn use. We'll take it a step further. We're talking about marriage and sexual relationships. In 2001, the rate of erectile dysfunction among men under the age of 40 was 5%, which is what it should be because we know that ED is kind of an old man issue. We've all seen those old man Cialis Viagra commercials that make everybody uncomfortable. But today, we're recording in 2024. The last statistic I saw, which was a few years ago, said that about 30% of the same demographic now experience erectile dysfunction.
Wow.
Now, it's not exclusively pornography. Life stress has increased. There's other factors at play, but let's not kid ourselves. Porn is impacting this, and we can get into the neuroscience to talk about why. But that's just the relationship sphere. We see that people who watch pornography are a lot less productive. We're hearing a lot more people losing their jobs, not getting promotions and whatnot because they're getting caught with pornography. And then I think on the more personal side, pornography is actually shown to affect your brain. It affects people's impulse control. It affects their ability to experience motivation, to delay gratification. The list kind of goes on and on. So we're seeing a rampant issue here. And even though I come from a faith background, I think it's important to note whether you are involved in the church or not, you could be atheistic and completely away from all this. Everybody's affected the same way. Like the stats aren't different inside the church versus outside. And the pornography industry is estimated to be worth over $100 billion year after year in their revenue. So we're talking about a worldwide epidemic that people aren't talking about, that's impacting their brains, bodies, relationships, and overall well-being.
Wow. Hey, friend, thank you so much for tuning in to the Dad Nation podcast today. And because you're here, I want to give you a free gift for listening. And this is called Igniting Intimacy. 44 questions to ask your wife to connect deeply and spark intimacy. Maybe you're watching this and you just feel like conversation is just growing real boring in your marriage. Or maybe you've heard from your wife that she feels like she's married to a robot, or that we don't ever talk anymore, or you don't talk about how you feel. If you've heard any of these things from your wife or felt any of these things, you need to download this free gift for you, because listen, the key to connection with your wife is through quality conversation and quality questions. Okay, I promise this will not disappoint. So check out the show notes below on YouTube or whatever streaming platform you're listening on, or you could just head to dadnationco.com/intimacy for that free gift for you, my friend. Okay, let's get back to the episode. Those are some sobering statistics, man. That's wild. So, I mean, so I think we can probably all agree that there's there's damage that happens. And actually, you know what, you mentioned Cialis commercials. Once you see this, you can't unsee it. But I don't know if you've watched any of these commercials or paid attention to the demographic. Like, the people that are being filmed now are like way younger. Like, you look at the
Younger.
Cialis commercials, there's like 30-year-olds,
Yeah,
late
30 to
20s,
40 year
early,
olds.
yeah,
Yeah.
40-year-olds, which is evidence of kind of what you're talking about. Obviously, they're targeting a new
Yes.
demographic because there's a higher need in a new demographic, right? So,
And it's not just that, but it's that guys, like, especially guys at our age, where you're kind of peak of your development, they're so desperate for to be, I guess, the ability to perform and to have
mhm,
that healthy connection, that yeah, they'll spend all the money in the world if it's going to fix that problem, because we
mhm,
all inherently know that should not be the case.
mhm. Yeah. So, okay, so we know that there's some issues with it, but why is it so hard to quit? Like, not only you, but why is it so hard for millions of men to quit this?
Okay, for this, we need to talk about business a little bit. Whether you're an
Okay.
entrepreneur or not, this will be helpful. The pornography is a $100 billion industry. So they make more money than the NBA, the NFL, and Major League Baseball combined year over year. So they are a wildly profitable industry. Businesses can only grow one of two ways. Okay, one way is that they increase what's called their LTV. Okay, LTV is lifetime value of a client. So the longer a customer stays with you, the more valuable you are to them. It's one thing if you go and get your teeth whitened. That might be a one and done. You may never do that again, but you need to see your dentist once a year, and that's why it's smart for the dentist to keep building his profile, because the lifetime value is actually very long, over 5-10 years. The other way that a business grows is they simply acquire more clients. So from a porn industry standpoint, they do both exceptionally well. And the way they acquire clients is not by running ads on Google. There was a time where that was the case. You do an image search and like, it was all of a sudden it was there. But they're much more sophisticated now. What they found is that if young kids can start to stumble into pornography accidentally, then they are much more likely to be lifetime clients, because early exposure is probably the greatest predictor of pornography addiction and other risky sexual behavior as people age. So early exposure is very powerful, because you're not fully developed yet. You might know that it's wrong, but it is capitalizing on the brain centers that are so reward driven that pornography is very irresistible in those younger ages. And then, of course, as you develop and you start to watch pornography and you watch more and it gets more intense, or you watch it in novel ways, more and more just gets more hardwired into your system, and you begin to build this dependency in your adult years. So The porn industry is incredibly insidious. They actually want people to get exposed at a young age. Again, accidentally. From the kid's perspective, it was an accident, but there's a lot of baiting. There's a lot of breadcrumb trails that the pornography industry knows are there that eventually lead them to this early exposure. It gets them hooked and they stay longer. And the longer you stay with them, the more money they generate. So there's a whole kind of industry at play that wants us to watch, and they want us to watch again and again and again, and they'll do everything in their power to keep us coming back for more, regardless of how it's impacting our well-being. They just want the clicks, they want the eyeballs, and that's how they make their money. So because they are capitalizing on these very intense reward centers at a young age, pornography becomes very, very addictive. And addictive is almost that word, we hear that and it kind of goes in one ear and out the other. Let me use a different word. It makes pornography very sticky. It makes pornography very difficult to quit because even though you want to and you put an internet filter or you join the accountability group, you have these very intense moments where the urges seem impossible to resist. And especially if you got exposed at a young age, which most of us have, we got used to getting this kind of level of reward from a young age. It becomes very, very hard to wean off of that, especially when just one layer, added layer to this is pornography is hyper produced. In other words, we don't think about this, but when a porn film is shot, there's a director and sometimes the scene doesn't go the way he wants it to. So he'll say, and cut, we need to try this again, da, 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 da. It's literally perfectly manicured so that you experience the greatest physiological response possible, something that can't really be matched by anything that's more natural in life, like a wife, or a more natural experience. And so this is what makes pornography very addictive, very sticky, very difficult to quit.
Mm. I think, man, I think you just hit a big point there with expectation. In my experience with talking with men who've had porn addiction, they, and especially if it happens before they actually experience real life physical intimacy, they find themselves in a position where when they do become intimate physically and they have sex or whatever, they're like, wait a minute, this is not like I'm used to. This is not like what I thought it would look like. And so there's this weird, like they've been fed the optimal experience, if you will,
Yep.
and then the real life thing is nothing like what they expected. Do you think that that contributes to some of these challenges with intimacy and ED and things like that?
Yeah, and there's neuroscience behind this. So, porn is what they call a super normal stimulus.
Mm,
So, the level of stimulation it provides your brain is unnatural. It is beyond what is normal. And if you watch pornography once, it's euphoric and it's amazing. And as far as the neuroscience goes, the impact is pretty minimal. But when you watch it over longer periods of times, your arousal threshold starts to increase. What is required for you to actually feel aroused, to feel pleasure, goes higher and higher and higher, eventually reaching unnatural levels. So even the most incredible experience in person doesn't actually trigger the same release of dopamine. And
mm,
this is why you're getting erectile dysfunction because the male's body is not responding because the stimulation they're getting during an in-person experience doesn't match up to what they see on their screen. To take it a step further, though, you then have the kind of secondary effects, which is that people who watch a lot of pornography end up losing their capacity for intimacy. And again, there's actually good science behind this that shows the pathways responsible for bonding with another person, whether it's platonically in a friendship or romantically in a marriage, both of those start to dwindle. And that capacity for intimacy declining is going to affect the quality of the marriage. It's going to affect the quality of the relationship, and it's going to cause difficulties in the sex life. And the last thing, even if all those things were taken care of, so there's no physiological issues, and there's a relatively stable emotional connection. Pornography sets these expectations of what porn is like, of what a woman should do, that she enjoys some of these things. And the reality is that's actually often not true. We have a lot of guys coming to us who feel sorry for themselves because their wife doesn't want to do XYZ and they think it's normal because it has been normal to them for the 20 years they've been watching pornography, but their wife is totally grossed out by it, or her body doesn't have that ability to contort, or whatever it is that we're talking about. And it can really create a lot of friction because the expectations are so lofty and implausible, and the guy doesn't really know how to manage that.
Hmm. Yeah, I think I was reading an article from Billie Eilish, or was watching an interview, and she was explaining her journey with porn, and basically just said, I mean, she got into a real deep, dark sort of place, got into like violent stuff, and it got to the point where she was saying like she couldn't get, aroused if it wasn't like over the top aggressive, borderline violent, and because it
Yeah.
had her exposure was so extreme to the point where regular normal intimacy was almost impossible for her, right?
Yeah, that was in an interview with Howard Stern. It was really interesting because she basically said that pornography was sex ed for her. And that is, I don't know about your experience, Mitchell. That was my experience. My parents didn't have to talk with me. My youth pastors all shied away from it. And so pornography truly was the only way I was learning pornography and peers, but predominantly porn. And that experience is more normal today, given just the level of early exposure with tech and all that. But the one thing she said that was interesting, and this is actually a great point, she said that because of the pornography she watched, which was mostly BDSM, so
Mm,
very intense, very violent. She didn't think she was allowed to say no because she assumed that was normal. So when she was having these sexual experiences as a I think she was a teenager when she was talking about some of these, and the guys want to do things that are, what she has seen on screen, they don't feel right to her. They're kind of embarrassing or humiliating, but she didn't think she had a voice. She didn't think she could even say no. So there's a whole other side to this, which is sort of the issue of consent. And one of the messages that we get from pornography implicitly as men is that it's all about us. It's
mhm,
all about me gaining my pleasure. It's all about what I want. It's all about what I like.
mhm,
And we end up becoming very selfish lovers. And really, truly healthy sexual connection is predicated on selflessness, being willing to serve the other above yours, knowing that if you prioritize them, you'll get your needs met as well. And that gets lost in translation when you're watching so much pornography.
mhm. Wow. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of these celebrities have been coming out and sharing their stories and sharing their struggles, and man, it's just incredible. It's powerful, when people share and also share their journeys of success, like yourself, and that it is possible to to move on from it, right?
Mhm.
I did have a question for you because I've also heard people say that the porn industry is very closely related to human trafficking, sex trafficking, all those things. And so a lot of times, when I have conversations with guys, they say, "Well, that's not real. That's just like fear mongering, trying to get people not to look at it." Is there any truth
Mhm.
to that? Is the porn industry actually connected to
Oh
human
yeah.
trafficking in that way? Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
The porn industry is the marketing department for sex traffickers.
Wow.
So there's an organization called Exodus Cry. I highly recommend everybody go check them out. They got some great, great material. Their whole mission is to basically abolish sex trafficking and sex slavery. So the first years of their work were all about, where is this coming from? Who are the ringleaders? And if we were going to actually shut this down, how would we go about it? And the topic that kept coming up in all their interviews and all their conversations and all their research was the subject of pornography. So after they did their first kind of docu-series and their first release, they agreed that they were going to spend the next 5 years understanding pornography and how it interplays with sex trafficking. So for 5 years, they went to all the red light districts of the world, Amsterdam, Thailand, Cambodia, all the places where sex trafficking is rampant. And you have these big rings that kind of operate underground. And they just, got to know the people and wanted to understand the women. What were their stories? They wanted to understand the buyers and the men. What were their stories? And how
Mhm,
did all this kind of converge and come together? And all the men that they studied, I mean, we're talking about tens of thousands of men who have bought sex, who are there regularly. Sometimes it's one-offs, it's all kinds of different situations, different stages of life, different upbringings, different ethnic backgrounds, a variety of demographics to distinguish these men. There's just one thing that they all had in common: early exposure to pornography.
mhm,
That was literally it. So early exposure to pornography became a predictor of whether or not people were more likely to actually participate in sex trafficking to fuel it by, being a buyer. Just because when you get exposed at a young age, what happens is your brain has this standard, and then eventually that standard gets boring. It's a process called desensitization. And so eventually you say, well, this is boring. So you start to click around and you watch different types of content, or you start to maybe explore a massage parlor or an in-person meetup or whatever. Things start to escalate. And that's why, all of these guys that end up at brothels, that was never the plan, but they got exposed to pornography at a young age. Things escalated, and then they found themselves in a place they never thought. And I'll tell you, we work with athletes, we work with physicians, we work with surgeons, we work with CEOs and executives and accountants, people that are white collared, well to do in our society. You would never think it. And they would never think it even of themselves. But it's because of the role that pornography played. It escalated things so much for them that no longer watching something on a screen was enough. They needed something in person, and they end up sex trafficking. So you can't really separate one from the other. They're so inextricably linked. Without one, the other doesn't exist.
Wow. Well, I mean, I believe that it was connected, but hearing the interworkings of it all, and from your research and your, your experience, it's, man, it's compelling.
But let me give
So
one more layer to that, if you don't
please,
mind.
yeah, please.
So I'm friends with a couple of people who were some of the top adult performers in the world. One of them won Male Performer of the Year many years ago, and some of the stories they've told me. Again, this isn't necessarily trafficking, but this is actually the other angle to this that a lot of people forget, which is that there's people on the other side of the screen that are someone's son, somebody's daughter, but also sometimes people that are doing things against their will on camera. And so this one friend of mine used to talk about how he had a contract, right? And his contract says, these are the kinds of scenes I'll do. These are the things I'm willing to do. I'm not willing to do, whatever. They sign the contract, they agree on a price, all that good stuff. Then while they're filming, the director will say, okay, next you guys are going to do this. And he'll say, whoa, whoa, wait a minute. No, that's on the contract. And it's actually pretty clearly stated I don't do this kind of stuff. And they would say, well, if you want to get paid, this is the scene.
Mm,
So they would do the bait and switch. And so you're not, they look happy because that's what they're
mhm,
told to do.
mhm.
But the reality is most performers are on drugs. The suicide rate is 5 times the amount of the normal population in porn stars. Um, I mean, most of them are doing things they don't actually want to do, and they're smiling because the drugs are numbing them from all the pain that they're experiencing physically and emotionally. So these are the things that you have to be thinking about of what you're actually endorsing and supporting. This is, a lot of guys will say, well, it's just me. It's just between me and God, or it doesn't affect anyone else, or, whatever. Yeah, it does actually. Those people on the screen to begin with, then you add in sex trafficking. I mean, there's layers and layers to this.
Mhm. Mhm. Wow. That statistic is wild, man. 5 times higher.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Like every month it seems like there's a popular porn star that's taking their life. It's really
Mhm.
sad.
Hey, we're going to get back to the episode, but while I have you here, I wanted to ask you, would you consider helping a brother who's struggling in his life right now? Maybe it's a guy searching the internet to help save his marriage, his health, or his family. Maybe it's a man that's just behind you on this journey. And we know, statistically speaking, there are thousands of men doing this. And we know that there are probably men in your social circles that are struggling with some of these very same things. If you'd be willing to help, this is how you can help. And I promise it'll take less than 60 seconds. If you've gotten any value from this podcast so far, would you be willing to give us an honest review and subscribe to our channel, whatever channel you're listening on? If you want to take this to the next level, would you consider sending this link to a friend of yours who you know would benefit from listening to this show? Now, why would you do that? Because the more men that hear this content, the more marriages we can save, the more fathers we can help step up, and the more lives that we can change forever. This isn't just for the men. This is for the wives, the children, and the generations to come. So I want to say thank you so much for doing your part to help other men find the support that they need. Now let's get back to it. Okay, so let's talk a little bit now specifically about, the men who are going to be listening. And statistically, a vast majority of the men who are listening to this episode right now probably struggle with a pornography, in some way or another, right?
Yeah.
So and then we also know that a lot of these men are fathers, and so they're going to have young kids that they also want to protect.
Yeah.
So let's talk specifically to the fathers, and what advice or what tips can you give them? What practical tips can you give married men these days to set them up for success, to be free of an addiction of porn so that they can move on and get back to healthy and normal intimacy with their spouse?
The first thing I want to say is that I know, we've talked about a lot of heavy aspects of this subject, and we also do know that statistically most men are watching and struggling. But I want to let you know that if you really take seriously what I'm about to share, recovering from pornography or getting pornography out of your life is not just possible, it actually becomes probable when you do this effectively. And this is after working, we've helped over 10,000 people quit pornography in one way, shape, or form. And like I said, we've worked with college students all the way up to professional athletes and doctors. These are principally based, and so it doesn't matter where you're at, doesn't matter if you've been trying recovery for 70 years. I mean, we literally had a client who was in his late 70s doing our program just because he wanted to end his life on the right note. Like,
Mm,
mad respect. Like, that guy is just unbelievable. But the point I'm making is what I'm about to share with you. You're not an exception. This will work for everybody. Okay. Our recovery philosophy is based on a simple principle, which is that the external life is the byproduct of the inner life.
mm,
Okay. What is seen is the result of what is unseen. A lot of people treat pornography addiction like a weed in their garden, and they try to run it over with a lawnmower. It's this bad thing. We don't want it here. We want to build fruits and vegetables. Those are the things we want to grow. These weeds are choking them out. They're getting in the way. Let's get rid of it. Let's put an internet filter on. The logic makes sense. You're on a device. So, of course, if you put the blocker on, then you won't watch anymore. And if we were dealing with solely an external issue, that would be 100% true. We could all pay the $10 a month to get that filter and we'd be good to go. And pornography would not be an issue if you didn't want it to be. The problem is that the reason you watch pornography has more to do with what's underneath the surface than above it. And when you settle for a surface level solution, you are not addressing the more root level causal elements.
mm,
So, if we want to actually have systemic change that lasts the test of time, that can survive a major life change, you and I just became fathers in the last year. I'll tell you, this stage of life is where we see clients come to us the most. It's a
mm,
major life change. I just got married. I just became a father, or I got a major promotion at work, or divorce, I suppose. Those are the four main catalytic events that lead people to actually get help because they put so much stress. And if you guys apply what I'm going to show you here in a minute, hopefully it'll prevent those situations from coming because we can actually get to the roots of the issues. Okay, when we talk about getting to the roots, there's three areas that we want to focus on. The first is cultivating self-awareness. If you are not aware, it cannot be repaired. So it's not enough for you to say, I was stressed, so I watched porn. I got an urge and I couldn't resist it, so I watched porn. Those are surface level explanations. We want a self awareness that is able to label emotions, define thoughts, and articulate what was taking place on an inner level that led to my poor decision. And sometimes that articulation is spanning 1 to 7 days prior. Sometimes it's even longer than that. It's having crystal clarity on what's going on at an internal level and being able to nip things in the bud before they develop into something that's much more difficult to resist. Our second bucket is heart transformation. And this is where we're dealing with parent-child relationships, trauma, early sexual experiences, sexual templates that can be influenced by those early experiences and other experiences, a myriad of things that are kind of delving into our past. And a lot of people want to skip over this. This is maybe not as fun, it's maybe not as sexy. I'm telling you, people who dig in here get the best results. We have a little mantra that he who is most vulnerable heals the quickest. He who is most
okay.
vulnerable heals the quickest. And we see this at play in its greatest form at this stage. When people are willing to be transparent about what they've been through, the struggles that have come with it, the impacts it's had on their life, That's where we see a lot of change, a lot of breakthrough. We're particularly fond of a modality called inner child work. All of my coaches are certified and specialize in it. They have to be, because we've just seen it's particularly effective. And whether you're faith-based or not, it works very, very well. The third bucket is shifting your identity. Old 12-step models would suggest once an addict, always an addict. We are not of that opinion. We are of the opinion that you can shift your identity and you can leave that former identity of being an addict behind. I think actually, if you believe that you are an addict still, even though you've been sober for X number of years, you're always one step away. You're always one bad decision away. For me personally, the last time I watched pornography was February 2016. And I don't even I look at old photos of myself. I don't even recognize myself. I'm
Mm,
such a different person now. My identity has totally shifted. And the gold standard of this pillar, that the way we know people are walking it out, is they are willing to be their authentic selves, even if it means being rejected. So the way we would say it is, I would rather be 100% my true self and rejected than 80% my true self and accepted.
hmm,
It is learning to be authentic unapologetically. And this takes time, it takes a lot of courage, and it's very difficult to do when your identity is still wrapped up in your addiction. But when you're willing to build a new identity or embrace a new sense of self, man, this is when people start to move mountains. And we see, I mean, your listeners would be no exception to this. If they really went through this system properly, this is where we would see promotions at work, marriages being restored, more confidence, people starting to take care of themselves, starting that business they always want to start, starting to hit the gym the way they always want to, asking that girl out that they've had a crush on for 6 years, but they were too afraid to do it. Like, this is where breakthrough really starts to avalanche in people's lives because the transformation process is happening at such a fundamental level.
hmm. Wow. Hey, yeah, if y'all can hear a bunch of clicking happen in the background, it's because my keyboard is about to light on fire because I'm taking so many notes. This is good stuff, man. I love that. And that phrase you just said, I'd rather be 100% authentic than, and can you say that again? It was
I'd
powerful.
rather be 100% my true self and rejected than 80% my true self and accepted.
Man, how many men are like 60%,
Yeah.
70%?
Well,
Uh,
how many people are telling men to be 60%, right? How many people are
mm,
telling men that we should be more feminine, that we should be quiet, that men are the problems in our society? It's the patriarch system that's created all these issues. Like, everybody's telling men to be 60%, and then our society's starting to fall apart. Not that I'm this egocentric male, but we need men to rise up and to be their true selves just as much as we need women to rise up and be their true selves. There should be, that's what real equality is. And I think a lot of men aren't getting the permission that they need to speak up and to be their true selves. So that's part of the mission here and what we're up to.
hmm. Can we just park there for a second? I have a couple questions for you because
Please.
you struck on a topic that I'm particularly passionate about. Not everybody agrees with me on this, but I do really strongly believe that we are living in a time where just it's a bit of a hyper feminized culture where men, I believe, are uh, constantly being told to be more feminine or to respond in more feminine ways. I
Yeah.
personally struggle with that a little bit. I talk with a lot of men who feel lost. They feel as though their natural responses to things are, they feel like they're way too aggressive. They're too, like they're an animal, kind of thing. And they're not natural. They're not normal. And so it causes them to become, that they just turn inward, to withdraw socially, to become more apathetic.
Yeah.
And a lot of the conversations I have with men are around learning to be comfortable with their masculinity, learning to be comfortable with how they're wired and their emotions, and that masculinity in its purest form is an amazing, essential, powerful thing that this world and relationships need. And
Mhm.
so you just mentioned that a little bit. So I want to pull on that thread. Do you see a
Yeah.
connection with sort of some of that narrative in media and that culture, and that connection to men feeling suppressed in that way and then turning to pornography or other things that way?
Yeah, so let's broaden this a little bit. The basis of everything that we do within our company is predicated on, if you change the man, you change the world. I really am just that ridiculous. I'm that crazy to believe that men are that important for our society's well-functioning and success. I think the messaging in society, I don't think all of it is malicious. I think some of it is, But I think what happened is men were so we were so anti-emotion. We were so, it's facts over feelings. It doesn't matter how you feel, push through. There were some messaging that I think was not actually the greatest.
Yep.
And I think the pendulum swung the other way. And we said, wow, we made this huge mistake. We're not going to make that mistake. Instead, we're going to embrace the more feminine, getting in touch with your feelings, embracing emotions, all that kind of stuff. I'm all for that. That's literally the first pillar of my system is self-awareness, labeling your emotions. But I think what's happened is the pendulum has just swung too much the other way to the point that we've actually abandoned our value for things that are inherently masculine. And I think that's where everything's lost. And my whole concept, change the man, change the world, is just trying to bring the pendulum back to the middle, just trying to center things again, because I do think the messages are discouraging us to do that. And I think that's why we're running into so many issues, all the identity confusion and people not having a value for long-term relationships like they used to. Even just the overall standard for integrity has become so diluted in our society. And I think these are the byproducts of men being silent and thinking that it's the right thing to do because, oh, men were so bad and whatever. No, we still need to be monsters a little bit. We still need to be loud and proud and unapologetic, and we need to also develop that gentle side that is empathetic and understanding. I don't see why you have to pick one or the other. I think you can be both. And I think that's when the masculine is operating at its absolute best.
Dude, that's so beautifully put, and I agree 100%. I think some of the old models that we, extracted from past generations, there are some good things from there, but there's a lot of bad too, a lot of disconnection, a lot of a lack of emotional awareness, intelligence, and so I think as well, there's a hybrid, right? There's a middle ground to be found, and we're learning a lot of amazing things from psychologists today, and there's a great way to combine both.
Yeah.
It's so funny you mentioned that about men and change the man, change the world. I mean, I say this phrase at the beginning of every single podcast episode that when the dad gets better, the whole family wins. Because I
Yeah,
do
that's right.
believe that when the father, I believe he sets an emotional tone in the home. And so I often say, it's your responsibility as a man to be the lowest heartbeat in the room, or to be, a thermostat, not a thermometer. Like
Mhm.
there is a power, there is a presence that we carry into the home, and whether it's breaking free from pornography addiction, or whether it's getting control over your emotions, practicing mindfulness, learning how to love, honor, cherish your spouse, it's powerful when men change for the better,
Mhm.
and our children get affected for the better, which their children, I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here, you get it, man.
Oh, dude, no, it's good. Don't stop, man. Don't stop. It's so important. I think people lose sight of this, that what you're doing right now is leaving a legacy behind for generations. And that's true. Like, I mean, it's true in the negative sense if we're talking about pornography addiction. One of the last pieces of my recovery, I was about to go meet with a specialist, and my dad knew about it. And as I was leaving the door, he said, "Hey, son, I just want to let you know I've actually struggled with this too. And
Wow.
I'm so proud of you for going to get the help you need because we need to change this for our entire family."
Wow.
Like again, like again, I'm very grateful that my dad did that for me. But there's a generational element here, and I am dreaming about the day where my kids they probably will get exposed to pornography, but where they get exposed and they respond the right way, and they don't
Mhm.
go down that path that I went on. But I think that's really just the tip of the iceberg. When we talk about guys taking fatherhood seriously, when we talk about guys bettering themselves, investing in their ability to have healthier relationships, take care of their finances better, have a career vocation that's making a meaningful difference in the world. That's what Change the Man, Change the World is really about. We're
Mhm.
actually working right now on another program. Once guys quit pornography, it's kind of phase two, and you don't have to have gone through the first program necessarily to do the second. But teaching people how to build a bulletproof life, like a life that is actually commendable, that doesn't just get the applause of people around you or whatever, but that's actually gonna leave ripples for generations to come. Because honestly, if we're not doing that, we're wasting our time.
Mhm.
That's why you're on this planet. This life is bigger than you. And when you can really embrace that, number one, quitting vices and pornography and that kind of stuff, that's priority numero uno. You've got to get that stuff out as quickly as possible because you got a life to live, you got people to lead, and you have a world that desperately needs you to be at your absolute best.
That's it, man. That's it. A question I often ask men is, if you were to die tomorrow, Would you be proud of the life that you left behind? Would you be proud of the legacy that you left? And
Wow.
that was the turning point for me, man. I was at a funeral, and I was playing at the funeral, and the speaker, the guy who passed away, was incredibly influential man, very generous philanthropist, very much left an amazing legacy. And the pastor of the funeral asked the people, attending the funeral, he said, "Are you living a life worth imitating? Are people looking at you saying, I want to have the marriage that he has. I want to be, the father that he is, and I sit inside stage. I was like, at that point, I was like 50 pounds overweight. We were in debt. Marriage was like hanging on by a thread. And I
Wow.
sat with myself and I said, if I died tomorrow, nobody would want to live the life that I'm living right now. I'm not living a life worth imitating. I don't think anybody would look at me and say, I want to be the husband he is to his wife. I want to honor
Mm.
my wife like he does, because I wasn't. And it
Wow.
was just this turning point of like, if I don't take ownership, um, I'm leaving nothing.
Mm.
And so, that was the part of that was the next day I got up and I, I tried to run a 5K. I made it about 300 meters and puked. But that was the start of the physical, the financial, the marital, the spiritual, emotional transformation. But it
Wow.
started with that, what we're talking about right now. That
Yeah,
when you
it's
take
powerful.
ownership and you say, I'm changing. No longer will I be a victim of what was, and I'm going to change the trajectory for my family so that, the buck stops with me. And I believe that's powerful and very masculine when men can take
Yeah.
that and take ownership, and change the direction. So, this has been so good, man. Thank you for your time. I
Yeah.
want to honor your time and just be intentional with it. But I do have two more questions left for you, as we wrap up this time together. The first question is this, and I ask every single podcast guest this question, and it is about death, because I'm a little bit morbid like that, but I find that the more I think about death, the more it informs me on how I ought to live. And so, if you will, now you have a son who's 10 months old. We're both new dads, but let's fast forward. Say your son is 10, 11, 12, and unfortunately you pass away, and your funeral is just over, and your family are sitting around the table, and they're just talking about you. They're reminiscing on the good old days, and your son speaks up, and shares. He begins to share about the man you were and the father you were. What are some of those things that you would want him to say about the life that you lived and the father that you were?
What a great question. The first thing that comes to mind is that I practice what I preached.
Mm,
Same outside, inside, doesn't matter the environment. There was a consistency and a reliability. I think the second is that I was always willing to take risks in spite of fear. And I think the third is just that I prioritize my relationship with them above my work.
mm.
And that they always felt like they were, the most important thing in the world. I feel like if I got those three things in place, I'd be pretty happy. That's a deep question, man. But those are the things that come to mind.
Mm. Well, thanks for sharing, man. I think I've asked this question a lot of times, and not once has anyone said, I want them to be proud that I was a millionaire, or I want them to
Yeah.
be proud of the 7 businesses I built. No one says that.
Yeah.
That not
Yeah.
once have I had a materialistic answer. It's always been, I hope that they felt like a priority. I hope that they felt like I showed up for them. I hope that they felt like
Hmm.
I gave my everything. I hope that
Yeah.
and so,
Yeah.
I love that, man. And you know what? I just encourage you, as I do, dig into that question even more, and as your boy
Yeah.
grows, just stay in alignment with that, and just being like, who am I being to this young man? Who am I being to my wife? Last
Mm.
question for you. There's going to be a lot of men listening to this who, like I said, we know statistically are struggling or have struggled in the past. So, how can we support you in this journey? Where can we find you on the internet? And if they want help, how can they find that with you?
Yeah, two simple things here. So for people who are struggling, you want to maybe understand what it's going to look like to get to the roots a little bit more. But I mean, you can always book a call with our team. I encourage people, if this is your first time being exposed to what I'm talking about, I don't want you to do that. That's a big jump. What I'd rather you do is you get my book, okay? And listeners of this show can get a free copy of it at thelast relapsebook.com. It's called The Last Relapse. There's a PDF copy available. You can buy a hardcover copy if you want. And all the money that we make off that, we donate to charity. That book is literally not a money-making endeavor for us at all. But I think that's a really good place for people just to get started. Now, I will say, if you're in crisis, you need the help right away, don't go to the book. Just book a call with their team. Let's get you started ASAP. And I think the other thing is, if people just want to, maybe find out a little bit more about what we're up to, learn about us, Instagram is the best way. We reply to all the DMs that come into the account there. And we're very, very active. And so that's a cool way for us to communicate, to get to know each other a little bit better. Or if you just want some, useful content that's not going to trigger you and get you derailed, there's a lot of that on Instagram. This is a way for you to populate your feed with something that's going to be a bit more beneficial. So the handle is Sathiya Sam. I wouldn't expect people to know how to spell that, but maybe you can put the link in the show notes. The book is called The Last Relapse. Either of those would be amazing.
Awesome. Well, for those listening, I'm going to have all those links in the show notes below on whatever streaming platform you were listening on. Sathiya, thank you so much for your time, brother. Again, I'll say this. I love what you're up to. I love the mission and what your team are doing. You're impacting thousands of men. Please don't stop. This world needs what you're doing, man. So thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. It was my pleasure.
Wow, that was some powerful stuff we talked about today. Listen, my friend, I hope you were encouraged. If you're listening to this and this is a struggle that you have experienced, I implore you to reach out to Sathiya and his team to get the help you need to get freedom from that addiction. It will change your life forever. This is all for us today, but I do want to tell you about the next episode coming up in a couple weeks with a gentleman by the name of Chris McKenna, and he leads a company called Protect Young Eyes, and he's going to walk us through the step-by-step process, what he calls the 5 layers of digital protection to help protect our children against digital dangers. This man is brilliant. This was a powerful conversation, and I know you are going to take so much away from it. So do not miss this episode coming up in a couple weeks. If you don't already follow the show or you haven't already subscribed to the show, hit that button so that you get notified when new episodes come out. Every 2 weeks for the next few months, you're going to be getting episodes from me. We got some incredible guests coming up, you guys. So listen, I hope this episode was impacting for you today. If you need help, if you need support, if you need coaching, whatever the situation is for you, reach out to me. My email is mitch@dadnationco.com. My website is dadnationco.com, or you can hit me up on IG. My handle is dadnationco. And I would love to connect with you to see how I can serve you in a powerful way. Okay, have an incredible week. I'm in your corner.